Yeah, so I'm just going to run through the same format as I did with the first one, just with comments and things. Your learning objectives is kind of all based around, you know, you look out for words like frequency, intensity, time, and type. Your FITT, that's something that will come up in your programming stuff, you have there. Trying to see if there's anything that stands out as a surprise, but like you'll know it'll go through your modules and stuff as well, like your injury risk recovery methods. There's nothing there, that that would surprise you. So I'm just the major notes are through and the rest of it. A lot of the stuff here also is kind of like guideline stuff, so it's kind of for most average people, I suppose this would apply to. So you've got your 150 minutes of moderate stuff per week for most people, which is kind of like one of your NHS figure type things, and it goes to or half that much more intense stuff, and obviously a combination as well. But you've also got your kind of common sense stuff, same as always, where it's like people who don't train could probably benefit from a bit less to start with, things like that. It's just nothing too major. But then kind of get into the more specific stuff. This is kind of how to balance your different training elements. Obviously, you can see what they are there, and you can see what those things are. That comes into frequency, your FITT stuff again. It's just different words. One thing I wanted to highlight was that this isn't necessarily true. Research came out last year, which if you're really, really interested, I can provide for you, to show that rep ranges outside 1 to 5 pretty much all do the same thing, provided you go to the last available safe rep.
Right, okay.
So your 1 to 5 is always going to be strength. We know that, and I have other materials that are like, if you really want to go into why, so it's good to just know that, but if you want to know more about why, I can also provide stuff. I'm not going to go into detail on that now. If you're doing these rep ranges and the last rep's not difficult, you're kind of wasting your time.
Yeah.
But we found that anything from 6 onwards, if the last rep is hard, is going to build muscle.
Yeah.
You'll have a likelier chance to build endurance from higher rep ranges, but realistically, everything up to about 40 reps is doing more or less the same thing. Right. But higher rep ranges, by default, kind of build more endurance anyway. So it's just good to have that differentiation, even though it's not necessarily true anymore. Okay. But yeah, so what have I put here? Yeah. Yes, so that was the one I wanted to point out here. You've got, this is your sort of flexibility. Like, again, say for example, someone like Curtis does flexibility every single day. So like, it's not necessarily, these things are just, again, guidelines. Whenever we talk about static, dynamic, and advanced methods of stretching, is there anything you could name within that based on from your level 2 and when you would use those different things? So static, dynamic, and advanced.
What do you mean, like doing it before a workout or after a workout?
That kind of thing. So what would you kind of place those within? So if you
like for certain exercises.
Yeah, no, just for like if you were to do static exercises within a session, where would you tend to put them?
What, to start?
Just static ones, the ones you hold still.
So that's the end.
Yeah, that would be one, because they're kind of to release a lot of the tension from muscles after you've been contracting them. Well, I mean, again, it's another one of those things. It's like, it's guidelines, like people.
Workout, you walk out, like, oh yes, okay.
And I mean, more or less, as long as your flexibility is generally good. Yeah. This is kind of just for teaching principles for 2 people who maybe don't know what they are. So it's good practice to have, but generally you won't do a lot of stretching. Your dynamics more of a warm up type thing. It's a flexibility routine that would approach mobilization and blood flow rather than actual flexibility.
So obviously help you throughout your workout then.
Yeah, and then your advanced methods come into your PNF, which we will cover later on as well.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, and you've done this with your level 2 stuff. If you can go back over your notes and your plans and stuff, and having that same structure for your level 3 one with the additional elements that we'll see is pretty much going to get you what you need. Same as we've seen better mobility, that dynamic stuff. Then get your pulse raised, your ramp, RAMP, raise, activate, mobilize, and potentiate. It's always important to keep in mind. Like we've done your cardio, your resistance stuff, and then your cool down with your static stretches. Yeah. It's really straightforward. And then it kind of, so this is where you're going to have to for your periodized plan, break things down for your session a bit more. Ideally, they were looking for a full body routine in your level 2, but like we didn't really go down that route. But this time they'll probably look for something more specific that's along one of these guidelines. I use methods that are different from this still with a lot of people, so it's less of a split and more of a volume based thing. A volume based thing, or a consistent progressive thing over the course of a week. But that comes down to periodization, which we are doing in the other slideshow. Splitting, which you most likely do in your own training. So you've got moving different elements of training to different points of the week. You common ones here: upper, lower, push, pull, and separate body parts, things like that. I would use a lot of that in my own training, but then for clients, I find that with people trying to get stronger, manipulating volume over the course of the week is actually, over the same movements, can have a better outcome on strength. And then later on, whenever you get into, so at the beginning of someone's program, they're more likely to respond positively to any training session, whereas later on, the stress that you have to apply to the body can take a week. So you have to balance the entire training volume over 1 week, which we refer to, you'll see with the different cycle names. You can split things differently when it comes down to that, but for beginners and stuff, this is the easiest kind of way to approach it. But if you want more information on any of that stuff, I can sort of show you where to go. And then when you come to your CV stuff, is there anything there you don't recognize?
The bottom two? Well, I've heard of them. I've heard of them. But
they're commonly known, but there's just some details about them. Continuous training, same intensity, long time stuff. Interval training, we all know about that. It's your HIIT and your LIIT and things like that. Your fartlek training is just random intervals and random intensities. It's just to get people. It's kind of like simulating like a football match or something, where you're not consistently doing the same thing. It's going to be 1 minute you're jogging, 1 minute you're standing still, 1 minute you're sprinting. You know, this sort of that kind of thing, and the time periods are random as well. So there's no the percentage. So a lot of these things, a lot of these cardio methods will use percentage of your max heart rate, which you see in that last bullet point. But yes, it's unstructured and varies in intensity across the session. So you can, the graph kind of helps you with that as well. But then Tabata, which Dave did for a long time, actually.
I think that's where I seen that name from when I was doing.
Yeah, I remember doing a couple of classes with him. It was quite fun. But the original setup is 20 seconds on and 10 seconds off. Usually 8 rounds with a minute between 4 blocks. So it's like 16 different exercises in a total of like 20 minutes. So it's quite intense. But you can adapt it to be, as long as it's more, it's like double the on to the the 2 to 1 ratio. Sorry, but yeah, it's not, they're not. Ultimately, interval Tabata are that's just a specific form of it. So it's not to get too caught up on. Fartlek is the one. It's the random one. Is there anything here that you're unfamiliar with?
Giant sets. Pyramids. Matrix.
Yeah. So your multi-sets, supersets, tri-sets, things like that. When pre and post exhaust will be something you'll see on the exam. Actually, it might be good to put in. I would tend to never recommend doing a compound after anything else. You'll start with a heavy, but for the concept of pre-exhaust, you maybe throw in a leg press and then a squat, so that you've tired something like that in your translate, which has its applications, but I don't really necessarily agree with them myself. But you can, you're more than welcome to work that way if you want to. Multi-sets, just that's the kind of 3 times 8 or whatever. Your supersets, 2 with no rest. Do you know the agonist antagonist balance? No. So say if you're doing a bicep curl, it's always the simplest one. The agonist is the one doing the work, so it's the bicep. But every time you're flexing the bicep, the tricep has to relax, because if it didn't, you wouldn't be able to move. So it's the antagonist, it's the muscle that's working against the bicep. So, like, say if I was trying to put my hands on the table and lift it, they're both working kind of against each other in tension there to stop my arms from straightening. So the agonist and antagonist are at odds with one another generally until one gives way to let the other one move. So I thought that would be important. I don't know why they didn't make that more of a point there, but still, it's easy enough to understand when you see it. Yes, triceps, same as superset, but with 3 exercises. Giant sets is 4 or more. It's the same principle overall. A lot of these.
4 or more?
Yeah, 4 or more. Joe does them.
Right,
If you watch him, he just keeps going and keeps going and never stops. They kind of.
And is that a good thing to do, giant sets? Never done them much.
So, not for strength. If you're strength, so again, it comes down to the stress adaptation stuff, which I'll show you later on. If you're training to get stronger, you want the time in between sets to restore your ATP. Have you covered ATP yet? No, but that'll come up as well. Probably I might end up doing that with you. If you're not restoring ATP, the body's not able to use energy and coordinate itself efficiently. So you don't want to be doing this for strength. When it comes to hypertrophy, if you're keeping the muscle tired, it will force it to break down more through like blood flow and things. But equally, rest is still good. So it's one of those things that I wouldn't entirely do giant sets, because you want time to recover between things as well. So
because you obviously need it too, but do you not?
Well, yeah, you do, because for energy management and stuff like that. But in terms of keeping the muscle fatigued and overloaded, it can be easier to just give it more and more and more stuff. So, matrices they've only really referenced 21s. 21s are like you break it down. So in a matrix, we break it down into phases. So you've got, say, bicep 21s, which people always do, is mentioned here as well. You would do the lower half of the movement, then the upper half of the movement, and then the full range, each for 7 reps.
Right, okay.
Just to kind of get mad volume, loads and loads and loads of volume. I don't think there's anything else they put in about that, but it's mostly for volume, because you can kind of do it. It does fit in well with classes, like they've said. So, negative reps. Comfortable enough for those are? No, it's so normally when we train, say like if you take a bench press, we'll focus on the concentric rep phases, but the negative rep focuses on keeping tension on the opposite. Okay. So for anybody listening, that's not so in a bench press. If you're doing bench press negatives, it actually says here somewhere you're focusing on the downward phase rather than the upward phase. There's safety measures obviously included in these, so doing them with compounds is not recommended, but it's commonly done as long as someone's there to help lift the bar and things like that. Very high stress, it can be helpful for building strength and sort of like stability and control and stuff. You would limit the number of reps as well, because it is a lot harder, because you're using a heavier weight just to control things. And this is what I put this in, because this was quite a big point whenever it came to my own exams, that they were looking out for these. Pre-exhaust and post-exhaust are mostly like bodybuilding technique stuff, so for your physique clients rather than your strength clients. Pre-exhaust, you're doing your isolations first, so you're doing your more shaping sort of exercises first before your larger compounds. Your post-exhaust is whenever you're doing them after, which is more common. There's no right or wrong, but if you're trying to get stronger, I would do post-exhaust, definitely, because you want the most energy to be available at the beginning of the session if you're trying to get stronger. Right, okay. But again, I can provide even more stuff on that if you really want to go into detail. And you've got here, so there's nothing that I didn't cover. So but yes, do make sure that these things are mentioned in your level 3, even if you don't intend directly to use either one of them. Just mention that you've gone down the route of one of them, because you will inadvertently do that. So pyramids are kind of like if you're using volume or weight on a graph, it would look like a triangle. Yeah. So you go up, or you go down, or you go up and then down. It's great, once you sort of draw it out, it's quite simple. You can use it with reps, or you can use it with intensity or weight. Okay. So, drop sets, you know what those are? Yeah, it's really simple. Drop the weight with each set. Nothing too complicated. Weight. Always put that in twice.
We'll have to talk about most of this in our.
Just mention that you understand where it comes in. Right. You wouldn't have to put in one of each of these, but if you have 2 or 3 different elements of these throughout the session, and it's like clear that you're doing it, it's fair enough.
Right. Okay.
He's put pyramids in twice, but flexibility training methods. Is there anything you see that you're not sure about there?
That PNF, we talked about that a minute ago, didn't we?
Yeah. We did that in your level 2 as well.
Did.
Yeah. Anything else that's
that ballistic?
Okay, that's right. So ballistic's the first one it mentions. It's kind of like bouncing. So it'd be kind of close to plyometrics,
Right.
but it's like longer duration on the ground.
Right. Okay.
So it's like using, so say if you're doing a calf raise for a stretch, you're sort of hopping on the bottom of it,
Right,
you're trying to get a little bit because you're using the weight of your body to push further into the stretch, or like say a hamstring pulse. So instead of holding a hamstring stretch, you just
Oh, right.
rocking against it. It would be more like that.
Right. Okay.
Dynamic you've done, and static you've done, but then it comes so PNF kind of comes into active static, so it's static with resistance, which you remember you did that for the hamstring. PNF is the kind of official term for that, which it's good to know stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. It's always good just to know that. With that, so you know the principle of like you add resistance, stretch, add resistance, it should stretch further, and so on and so forth. It's just include that in your flexibility session to show that you're kind of getting a range of different things. There's nothing. It's all like use people's opinions of what you've done to inform what you're doing going ahead, or what they said in consultation to. Say if someone says like they have severe knee pain, don't get them doing barbell squats right from the off, things like that. Just again, common sense. This will come down more to like the periodization side of things. Again, common sense. What you choose will affect the end result. It's kind of obvious, There's nothing too much. It's kind of scaling down the session as you go. I've got notes here on that. Whenever it talks about like promoting muscular balance and training large muscles, you want to look like what I was saying earlier with your post exhaust. It's usually smarter to do a larger, more difficult movement with more joints involved to start with, and then phase down as the joints become less involved. Larger muscle groups it refers to as well, but like that's just because they require more energy realistically. But it's a similar principle in both of those cases. Same thing again, high scale complex exercises first. You don't want to end a session with a power clean because it's really, really difficult to do. And your synergists and fixators, which are like your stability muscles, or anything that's not directly involved but helps keep joints in line while you're doing certain things, leave them last because they're not actively involved. They're they are important. It's important to have them grow and get stronger. But tuning them first is going to take energy away from the more important stuff. So it's like say that what it says there is whenever you're doing like a compound session, maybe leave the core stuff to the end, because the core is crucial for keeping the body upright. So you don't want to tire it out before you're doing when it's required. You ever seen any of these before about monitoring the intensity of a session?
The talk test, isn't that when people are actually working out, asking them how they feel and stuff like that?
RPE.
Is that rates?
That's great. Heart rate, and then observation is just like look that up. RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion.
Right. Okay.
Talk test, like you said, you can tell by how someone speaks, how they're getting on, and you can kind of adjust things based on that. Observation, it's quite obvious. You look out for signs like these, and you can adjust things based on that. Heart rate, it's quite obvious. The big letdown there is that equipment can be costly, and it's not always accurate either. And there's just so much data that you can assess that it's maybe not as helpful. Although if someone does have a heart condition, you can monitor things like that way. There's different mathematical formulas for things for like your predicted max heart rate and things like that. Just so you tell someone's not getting too like into their high 90s or something like that. And your RPE, rate of perceived exertion is like, it's like observation, but you give them a number on a scale of 1 to 10. So it also this actually ties into your heart rate as well. Okay. Roughly, but you kind of I don't know. I've never seen it go above 10 before, but we've got above 10 here. I always thought it was 0 to 10, but this must be a scale of like 0 to 16 for some reason. But there's both there. I would probably for your exam use 0 to 16. So this is more of a long-term thing. Or someone's coming to you and they say they're stressed at work or their job's too difficult. These kind of things will pop up. I've also put in depression is a big one, low motivation. You can miss periods as well. Really bad headaches or migraines, and your sleep will suffer for that as well. So if you have something that measures people's sleep, you can get metrics like this as well, and you can spot overtraining quite quickly. I've never actually seen it in anyone other than myself, but you can spot these things coming on if you look out for signs like that. Is there anything on that list that you're? Yeah.
No, I would just need to probably run over the likes of some of the things I went to, like that ballistic and the ones before, but I won't.
Well, there's practical sessions that we're meant to be planning, which is why I was kind of more comfortable to do these, because I can't really do a practical session by video, whereas this is okay. So we will go back over that stuff, so I wouldn't worry too much. But then we'll go back out and we'll go into periodization. And this one's shorter. It's more about principles, which actually you'll probably find this more interesting, because program design is just like, what are you going to put in it? But this is why you put in certain things for certain reasons. And there's some supporting materials I can send you if anybody wants to know more about that as well. Yeah, it's all principle stuff, range of different designs. Yeah, and just applying those design stuff, nothing major. This is the stuff that they're going to look out for again whenever it comes coursework time. When you talk about your FITT, SMART, your long, medium, and short term stuff. So that's all that stuff to keep in mind.
Yeah.
But I've highlighted these three words here: micro, meso, and macro.
Okay.
Do you know what they mean?
No.
Small, medium, and large.
Oh,
It's like it's small, medium, large.
Micro, is that small?
Yeah.
Yeah. Macro is large.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep it that way.
Say you're working with an athlete who's got a seasonal calendar. This is their September to June.
Okay.
This is like September to Christmas, January to March, April to June.
Right.
So like macro is your usually, not always, but it's your full term of working with someone for maybe a year or so.
Yeah.
If it's an Olympian, it could be 4 years. That that kind of thing. They call that a quadrennium.
Right, okay.
Just if you're interested. These are the sections of breaking down training within that longer one, and then within those sections you break down into individual, usually sessions or weeks or events, essentially.
Okay. And would you have a lot of people who do that?
I don't actually. It's less common now. Usually you would have a strength and conditioning coach working with a team who would do that, whereas individuals, I've worked on it with individuals for ages, and I decided to stop because so many of them get 6 weeks in and some of the work changes and they don't. It's kind of like, it's like this, what we're doing now. You start with good intentions and the timing just doesn't work, so it's usually better to go on a linear model, like you'll see in a minute. But yeah, macrocycle, mesocycle, microcycle, everything from start to finish from what you're doing right now. 12 weeks to 4 years. Mesocycle is broken into shorter term goals, so like it's quite obvious, usually up to 3 months ish. And then the microcycles usually about a week, but sometimes can be just 1 day as well. I have coursework that I did for my level 4 that has a full seasonal calendar for tennis.
Right. Oh, right. Okay.
That breaks it right down from a full 12 months all the way to every single day of training. So if you want to see that, just say I can send that out as well.
Yeah.
It's dense though, is the only thing, because like there's 2 sections to it. There's the year-long one, and then there's a 12-week block breakdown. So, but that I can show you that just to make more sense of it. Yes, this is a sort of standard approach usually with beginners. If strength training doesn't always apply to this, but if you're doing hypertrophy and things, a lot of bodybuilding programs and things like that will work this way. As your volume, which usually is your number of reps, as you go on, your volume will come down as your load increases. Your load, when intensity is load, whenever you're doing weight training, this can also refer to running. So the closer you get to a marathon, the faster you're going, the less running you're doing over the course of a week. It's kind of obvious. It's important to just remember that this correlation is referred to as inversely proportional. So as one goes up, the other comes down in direct correlation. Yeah. So this is like one of the different models that you can use for periodization, which is step loading, and it looks like steps. But the kind of reason I've highlighted it is because, so again, this is more, it's hard to kind of define who this would be for.
Okay.
But it is, so if it was broken down into weeks, it doesn't really make sense. But if you, so 4 months, say if you're going over the summer, and this was September, you've got June, July, August, and then September, whenever like a football season starts, this is when they're at their peak. And instead of recovering, you kind of want to maintain that as much as you can. But you can see how the method works. If you gradually build someone up, then you let them come back down. But if you look at the shape of this overall, that so you're starting low and you end medium in that recovery phase. When you're recovering, you're actually better off. That is the aim of training. So the difference between training and exercise is movement, training is progression, right? So with this here, in any model, ideally what you want to do to make it training and not exercise is get someone to the point where they're, every time they stop and rest, they're better than they were before. And that can be over any length of time. A guy called Zelia, who was, I think, Hungarian, I can't remember, but he founded in 1929 this a theory called General Adaptation Syndrome, GAS, which I also have loads of notes on. Really, really interested on how the body responds to stress and how you can then apply training to the body to stress it manageably, so that every time the body rests, it's at this level rather than this level. And it deals with overtraining and how if you keep going up and up and up and up and up, you will plummet. Whereas you want to manage a block, drop a little bit of weight, but every time you rest, you will be better than you were last time you rested. So it's really, really interesting when you break into it, but I could go on about it for ages. So, but that's a really important principle to know about if you're kind of interested in what training and exercise are in relation to one another, because that there is what breaks them apart. It's really, really good. And then so this is kind of going back a little bit. Whenever you come to, when I was talking about linear training, that's kind of like constant progression forever. There's no seasonal calendar. So like a golfer, so they don't really have a season, so you would consistently, or tennis or badminton, or kind of like lawn sports, I suppose, there's no season. But if it's non-linear, so like a seasonal sport, like I was saying already, you want to try and manage things differently than constant progression, because you can't predict the stress event that a football match would have on a person's body, because it's unpredictable. There's no telling what's going to happen. So you can't manage their training to constantly be getting better, because it could be interrupted and they could accidentally overtrain. So this also comes into, you're building someone up for a season, sustaining them through the season, and then relaxing, and then building them up again for the next one. So that's what your non-linear would be.
Better then.
They're still getting better. It takes longer, but they're at a higher performance peak for a longer period of time. So it's harder to manage. Yeah, it's really, so periodization is one of my favorite things to look at. It's just a pity they don't get more opportunities to do it. So say if you look at this, right, so you got accumulation, which is your first phase, which is like getting you into it. So it's usually your muscular endurance and hypertrophy. So you're building the base for things to kind of expand on. I mean, 2 to 6 weeks is just an example, obviously. Transmutation, again, it's just kind of complicated words for these things. That's when you're starting to build in the strength elements to the hypertrophy and things like that. There's obviously, you've got your plyometrics and your speed and agility and all kinds of other things, but just going with strength here. Your realization is where you're training for your peak. And I put in here, this is where your performance event comes in. About here, and then you recover. So it's those ideas of like, you build someone up, then they either do their thing, or you recover in time to move on to what's next. Then that's just a breakdown of that, a bit less complicated. And then this is kind of a breakdown of, again, that base. I have, again, loads of notes on this stuff and how strength builds on a pyramid basis as well. So I can send those. Like I've said, muscular endurance and hypertrophy, you want to get the muscle able to do things for a long time. Then you want to make it bigger, then you want to make it stronger. Then power is when you make it faster. Strength is force production. Power is force production for time. So the more force you can move in less time, the more powerful you are. That's the direct actual meaning of that, which again, which I find that really interesting as well. So there's the different ways to break down essentially the same thing over these. And that's kind of for you guys to do. I'll leave it on the screen for a bit so you can see it in the video. But you should have that somewhere as well, and we'll keep on top of the tasks as we go. Is there anything that you're not sure about?
No,
it's easy principle stuff. It's all kind of like new information, but it should be interesting if it sticks.
Interesting. That one is far more interesting than the other one's
the other, I mean, it's not, because it's all like, oh, you got to be nice to people, you know. But this is
anyway. But that's pretty interesting that I would look up
Cool.
Some of
Oh, well,
that,
I'll provide. So
yeah.
what I'll do when I'm putting this video together is I'll send through everything else as well,
Yeah, no,
and you
perfect.
can always ask me questions because this is the part that I like the most.
Yeah.
It's like
That's the interesting part. Some of the stuff that we're doing, but that's kind of
yeah, it's rough.